Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In this fifth episode, it's actually a continuation of the fourth episode where I was discussing the fact that at times people say that, we're studying the Quran, we are trying to study the tafsir, but I just don't feel anything. I don't feel any connection with Allah. I don't feel anything in my heart when I'm studying the Quran. So why is that the case? And I mentioned in the previous episode that in Surah Baqarah, of course, because Allah already knew that this would be the situation for many people. So right in the beginning of the second chapter, Allah tells us that if you want to have guidance from the Quran, there are two things that you need to have. One of these things I discussed in the previous episode, it was about your mindset. So if you have a growth mindset where you want to change, where you want to overcome your obstacles, attain your true potential, then you have a growth mindset and the Quran will be perfect for you. But if you have a fixed mindset, then it will not. Now, besides your mindset, the second thing that the opening verses of Surah Baqarah inform us is that you need to have the right attitude. And what that means in specific is that if you are someone who is not humble, you have a lot of ego, you are very proud, you're very arrogant, you're very much a narcissist. Someone who's just always pleased with himself, he always wants to be praised. He believes that everything that he's able to accomplish has been done because he is so smart. If that's the kind of person you are, and you have no concept of empathy, so everything is about you. You're very self-centered, okay? You're very competitive. You cannot stop and feel what the people around you are feeling. If that's the kind of person you are and that's your attitude, then regardless of the mindset you have, the Quran will not make sense to you. And the reason is because Islam, the entire message of Allah, it revolves around Haququllah and Haququl Ibad. Haququllah meaning that there are certain rights of Allah, and that in specific is talking about the basic rituals like 5-time prayers and zakat, hajj, fasting, and so on. These are things that are directly, it's just between you and Allah. It doesn't impact anyone else. It's just between you and God, and so these are acts that you have to perform. But at the same time, there are activities which are called Haququl Ibad. And so it's basically your relationship with Allah's creation, how you treat mankind. So do you treat them with love, with mercy, with compassion? Are you very much interested about upholding justice? Are you very much keen on spreading good and forbidding evil? All of that comes in Haququl Ibad. And that really is what Islam and the entire message of Quran, it actually circles around. And of course, it's not just the Quran. Since the beginning of time, when you look at all the prophets that came and all the books that were sent, it always contained two things, Haququllah and Haququl Ibad. So someone who's proud, who's arrogant, who cannot stand any form of criticism, who's very self-centered and also very jealous. And someone who can never understand the grief that other people are feeling. Because they're so self-consumed. A person like that can never do Haququl Ibad. In fact, a person like that cannot even do Haququllah, because when you are very proud and when you're very arrogant, to be told to humble yourself and to do 5-time prayers, to be told that every time you have achieved something great, it's not because of you, it's basically because of Allah, so thank Allah. Don't think highly of yourself. Immediately go out and give sadaqah. These are things that someone who is very proud cannot accept, because in his mind or in her mind, this is because of him. This is because of her talent and her skills. It's not because of Allah. And so, despite having a growth mindset, if your attitude is not right, then the Quran will not make sense to you. Now, to further just elaborate on this point, when often people say that I want to connect with the Quran, I want to connect with Allah. The first question you have to ask is, what do you mean by that? Because normally when you talk about other relationships, you don't say, I want to connect with this person. You say, I want to be able to trust this person. I want to have a strong bond with this person. I want to become friends, good friends with this person. You don't say, I want to connect with this person. So when you say you want to connect with Allah, you want to connect with the Quran, what does that actually mean? What you actually imply by saying that is that I hope that the words of the Quran, which of course mean the words of Allah, can penetrate my chest and directly enter into my heart. That's basically what you're saying, because when the words of the Quran are able to enter your heart, that is when your heart has contentment and peace and sukoon. So if you go back to the very first episode where I told you about the deadly racetrack, and I told you that if you're in that race, then it's going to end in misery, it's going to end in anxiety and depression, there's no contentment, there's no peace or long-term happiness. That only comes when you race towards Allah. So now I'm just elaborating on that point, that racing towards Allah, getting contentment and peace, means having the words of the Quran enter into your heart. Now, interestingly, Allah has been so merciful to insan that He has ensured that nothing can enter the heart except the words of God, because there is something in the heart that is very, very valuable. And if that thing becomes corrupt, or if that thing is weakened or destroyed, it will destroy us. And that thing is the ruh. And this is explained in the tafsir when you look at the term nurun ala nur. For those of you who've studied tafsir, you will know this. If you don't, then you can start looking up tafsir for the term nurun ala nur, which is in Surah Nur. And that helps to explain that the ruh that we have, which is our link to Allah, which is the only divine thing inside of us, which gives us eternal happiness and sukoon, that is inside our heart. So clearly, whatever enters the heart will be able to affect the ruh. If it, of course, is the words of Allah, the words of God, it will strengthen the ruh. It will give you contentment and peace. If it is evil, or if it is the whispers or the waswase of Iblis, then it can damage the ruh. So Allah has protected the heart in the sense that nothing can enter the heart except the words of God. Now, I've explained this in more detail in my book, Qalb and Quran. So I cannot go into detail here because the podcasts are supposed to be 10 to 15 minutes long. But of course, if you want more information on this, if you want more proof or evidence of this, it's all available in my book, Qalb and Quran. Besides that, what's important right now to understand is that to protect the ruh, only the words of God, the words of Quran, can actually enter the heart. And once they're able to enter the heart, you get contentment. You get your connection with Allah. But the problem is, if you don't have the right attitude, then your heart becomes very hard. There are layers and layers of arrogance, pride, jealousy, hatred, animosity, all of these things that start covering up the heart, which makes the heart very hard. So although the evil around us, although it cannot enter the heart, Allah has ensured that He has protected the ruh, they can start to cover the heart. So you can have layers and layers of this wrong attitude covering up your heart and making your heart very hard. And the harder the heart becomes, the more difficult and impossible it becomes for the words of the Quran to penetrate all those layers and then directly enter into the heart. That's why the first thing Allah tells you in Surah Baqarah is, if you want guidance, do two things. Number one, make sure you have a growth mindset. Number two, remove those layers. If you are not going to do that, then there's no point studying the tafsir. There's no point studying the Quran. It's not going to make sense to you. It's not going to have any impact on you because you've not learned to change yourself. Hakukullah and Hakukul Ibad will not appeal to you. It'll be so hard for you to understand the concept of forgiveness, the concept of mercy, the concept of justice, because your heart is filled with hypocrisy and injustice and intolerance, jealousy. You're in fact so proud that you cannot stand being criticized. You cannot stand being told that you might be wrong on something. And if that's the kind of person you are, then of course the Quran is built on trying to improve yourself. How can you improve yourself when you cannot even stand being told that you might be wrong? So the idea is that remove all of those layers and make your heart soft so that the words of the Quran can enter. Then the Quran will make sense to you. Then you will feel contentment and sukoon. And I just want to mention this beautiful hadith where the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was explaining this by saying that, divine guidance, in other words, revelation, in other words, Quran, is like a heavy rainfall. Now, when that rain falls down onto the land, if the land is fertile and very soft, then the water will be absorbed, it will enter into the land, and then eventually you will have grass and crops and vegetation and all kinds of flowers and beautiful things that will come out of that land. But if the land is dry, it is very, very dry and hard, then it can rain as much as you want. It's not going to enter the land. You will not get any vegetation or flowers or grass, anything that comes out of that land. And he explained this is the situation of the heart. If your heart is soft and it's fertile, it will absorb the nur of the Quran, the words of Allah, and it will change you. It will transform you. You will be able to realize your potential. You will be able to realize your inner qualities that Allah has given you, and you can become a much better version of yourself. But if your heart is very hard, it's filled with all of those layers, the nur of the Quran is just not entering. And then at that point, when you complain and say, oh, well, I guess for some reason Allah doesn't want to connect with me. Maybe Allah's angry with me. Maybe that's why, the Quran is not helping me. No, Allah, that's not how Allah works. The reason it's not affecting you is because you've not worked on examining yourself and fixing yourself. So if you have layers of pride and arrogance, jealousy, if you have no concept of empathy, and this is actually very important because empathy and emotional intelligence has to do with the fact that you need to understand that there are people around you who might be hurting. They might be grieving. They might just be having a very bad day. So don't go around celebrating your success. Don't go around talking about how happy you are or about the great things that you've been able to achieve in front of someone who's grieving, in front of someone who's actually lost something, because you're just hurting them a lot more. And this is something that Hazrat Ali said, in fact, at one point as well, that, if you have parents, then don't talk about your parents in front of an orphan. If you have a lot of money and wealth, don't talk about it in front of someone who's poor. And the only way you can do that is if you open up your eyes and if you are aware of your surroundings. At times we just don't care about anyone else. We only care about ourselves. So, when we end up hurting someone else, we say, well, I'm sorry, I didn't know that she was upset. I had no idea that she just failed her exam. I had no idea that, she had faced such a huge trial or such a huge mishap. Had I known, I wouldn't have said it. But see, that's the whole point. The whole point is stop always thinking about yourself and start conversing with people and trying to understand what they might have gone through in their life, or try and ask them how their day might have gone. Or if you see someone very quiet, go up and ask them if there's anything that you can do for them, because that's the only way you'll find out how they're feeling. And then you can understand, should I share my good news or should I not? The idea is don't have apathy, have empathy. Okay, apathy is you just don't care. You have no interest. But empathy is the entire opposite. Empathy is the core of Islam. So the important thing is that even if you have a growth mindset, so you want to improve yourself, you want to become a better version, you want to be able to overcome all of your hurdles and obstacles, even if you have a growth mindset but your attitude is wrong, then the Quran is not going to make sense to you. And the perfect example of that we have in the Quran is in fact Iblis. Iblis, he is a jinn. And at one point, he was a very fond and devout worshipper of Allah. He was considered to be even better than all of the angels. And the reason being because angels were created, they were designed to worship Allah. They don't have choice, but jinn do have choice. And despite having choice, Iblis chose to worship Allah. He would do everything that Allah expected of him, that Allah commanded him to do. He was an excellent worshipper of God. But then one day, Allah decided to create insan. And when he created Adam alayhi salam and he told Iblis and the angels to prostrate in front of Adam, they all did except Iblis. And Iblis had a proper argument with Allah, and he said, I'm not going to actually bow down to this man because I'm better than him. So Iblis had a growth mindset. He did want to overcome obstacles. He did want to elevate himself. That's how he became the best of the best. That's how he was even better than the angels. That's how he was always worshipping Allah by choice. But the attitude was wrong. He was so jealous that he could not stand the fact that insan has been designated as being superior to him. He was incredibly jealous. And then when Allah condemned him and wanted to send him to Jahannam, he's been a devout worshipper of Allah. He knows how merciful Allah is. He didn't even ask Allah for forgiveness. He didn't even say, Allah, I'm terribly sorry. I don't know what came over me. In fact, he fought with Allah and he said, Allah, this is your fault. This downfall of mine is because of you. Had you not done this, I would not have made this mistake. And so then he furthermore challenged Allah. This is what I'm talking about, is the wrong attitude, which Allah tells you right in the beginning of the Quran, that if that's the kind of person that you are going to be, then you might as well as put the Quran down. It's not going to make sense to you. Fix yourself, your mindset and your attitude, and then the words of the Quran will enter into your heart and you will find the sukoon and the connection that you're looking for. May Allah guide us all. May Allah forgive us all of our sins. May Allah enable the nur of the Quran to penetrate into our hearts. And may Allah grant us all salvation. Assalamu alaikum.